Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth in the series of videos explaining how to play the City of Stains, which is available on Tabletop Simulator. I'm Rob, and in this video, I'm going to explain to you the normal progression of how the game works, the cycle that is typical of the game, how a specific round uh, plays out. And to do this, I'm going to hop back into Tabletop Simulator. I'm going to imagine that the previous setup we used is applicable. There are three factions in this three-player game: the Crown, the Circle, and the Guild. Uh, this is a scenario pretty near the beginning of the game. And every time you play, your game is going to be divided into a number of rounds. A round is contains various phases, and those phases are tracked on this little tracker at the top. This gold triangle determines which phase you're in any given round. The rounds are tracked by means of this tracker, and you can see that at the beginning of the game, the tracker is at North Catch, which is the quarter described as number one. So for the first round of the game, the tracker will sit here. In the next round, it'll move to two, which is Laston, and through each of the quarters by number, indicating what round you're currently engaged in. When the tracker has made it all the way to Traitor's Ridge, which is the ninth of the quarters, then this will mark the last round and the game will come to an end at the end of that round. The other way that the game may end is if all the event cards in the event deck have been used up or one of the players has claimed victory by way of controlling the requisite number of quarters or the specific victory condition on their player board. So let's imagine this is round one. It's not, because there are certain things that have already occurred on the board, but for demonstration purposes, it's round one of the game. The first phase in any round is known as the action phase. This is the phase in which the players take actions. Those actions are going to be explained in a subsequent video, but you should know that starting with the first player during the action phase, every player will take an action. They do so by playing a card from their hand. They either play that card face down, in which case they take what is known as a basic action. The basic actions are depicted graphically at the bottom of the board here, or they play the card face up and take what is known as an advanced action, i.e., the action depicted on the card itself. When all the players have played all their cards and have no cards in hand, that marks the end of the action phase. As I say, that phase will be dealt with in more detail in a subsequent video, but once the action phase is completed and all the players have played all the cards, then the marker moves on to what is known as the influence phase. And in the influence phase, the players add influence to the various quarters in which they have influence flags. So those flags are on their buildings. So in this example, all three of the factions have their starting building in play. Each has two influence flags of their color. But in addition, the Crown faction has managed in this first round to build an additional building, and that building is the Sepulchre. That building has been built in the quarter known as the Hill. Now, if you look at the building card, you'll see it also has a white church influence flag on it. But because the church is not playing in this particular game, only the yellow crown flag and the coin flag are placed, as is the rat. For completeness sake, let me just copy and paste a rat token into the hill. Right, now we get to the influence phase, and each faction, and you can do this simultaneously, it's not required to be done in turn order, but each faction now adds influence into the quarters where they have flags. So in Gate Town, the crown has 2 crown flags, so I add 2 crown influence. In the hill, the crown has only 1 crown flag, so I add 1 crown influence. When it comes to the guild, they only have 2 flags in play from their initial building, so 2 influence for the guild goes into the west quarter where they have their building. Likewise, for the circle, they only have their starting building in play, so 2 influence goes into the warren where the circle has its 2 influence flags. And influence flags are the main way of adding influence onto the board during the influence phase. And that is the influence phase completed for these 3 factions. The next phase is known as the income phase. This is the phase in which the parties gain income and also pay out salaries, as it were, or disbursements to the various leaders that they have. Now, the rule in the city of Staines is that leaders who are out in the city are considered to be supporting themselves by engaging in income generating activities. The only leaders that are required to be paid an income, therefore, are the ones still on your faction board. And they get paid an amount equal to their level. So if we have a regard to the Crown's board at the moment, 2 of their leaders are in the city. That is Prince Kovich and the King's Axe. So they don't count when it comes to salary payments. However, you will see all 4 of the Crown's other leaders are on its faction board, and they will need to be paid. And you can see that all 4 of them are level 1. Well, what about income? Well, the way we work out income is the base income of all the factions is determined by the number of coin flags in play. Now, in this case, the guild started with a coin flag on their starting building, and the crown has subsequently put a coin building or a coin flag into play. So the base income level of all 3 factions is now of the 2nd level. So we've moved all of these income cubes up to the 2nd level because there are 2 flags in play. And that would be the base income, except for the fact that each faction gains an additional level of income for coin flags in quarters that they control. And that's an important thing to remember. So, for example, here, you'll remember we added 1 influence for the crown, taking the crown's total influence to 4. Now, the crown would have to control this quarter in order to gain the additional benefit of this coin flag. Now, the crown has 4 influence, and the civilians still have 4 influence. Now, normally speaking, this would mean that as a result of a tie, the player would not control this quarter. However, because the crown is able to decide ties in its favor, it will determine that it in fact controls the quarter, meaning that it gets the benefit of controlling an additional coin flag, and therefore it advances 1 on the income track. So what has happened is the crown is now going to earn 4 income as opposed to the other 2 factions who are going to earn 3 income. Now, if we look at the crown's board, you will see that it has to pay out 4 coins for the 4 level 1 leaders that are currently on its board, meaning it would have a net gain of 0. However, should be borne in mind that one of the leaders of the crown, namely Master Braz, is a passive money-making leader. So as long as he is active, i.e. not in jail, exile, or in the graveyard, the crown, when it earns funds, earns an additional 1. So in fact, the income of the crown would be 5 coins. It would pay out 4 for its leaders, and the net result would be 1 additional coin to the crown's money supply. When it comes to the guild, their base income is 3 coins. They don't get the benefit of controlling that additional flag, so their income is 3. But if we look at their board, you'll see that they have 4 level 1 leaders, like the crown, on their board, and therefore they have to pay out 4. So effectively, they lose 1 coin, so I'll delete 1 coin from their stash. So it's a negative income for the guild. If any faction is required to pay money and they can't do so, the number of coins they are unable to pay is the number of influence tokens they must remove from the city. They choose where to remove them, but they must be removed. So running out of money ultimately will also reduce your influence. Lastly, the circle. Now, if we have a look at the circle's income, like the guild, it is 3 coins. However, the circle has chosen to leave on its board two level 2 leaders and 2 level 1 leaders. So their expenditure would be a total of 6 from the 3 that they gain, meaning a net loss of 3. So I remove 3 coins from the circle. The circle is having money problems from turn 1, which is not uncommon for this particular faction. So that is how the income phase progresses, and that is a complete income phase demonstrated. The next phase that you go through is known as the event phase. In the event phase, we move down here to the event deck, which I'm just shuffling for good measure, and we draw an event card. The event cards are events that generally affect everybody, and there are 2 kinds of effects. The first thing you need to know about an event card is that certain effects are in blue and certain effects are in a brown bar. A blue bar indicates an immediate effect, and a brown bar indicates an ongoing effect. This particular one has both an immediate effect and a brown ongoing effect. If a card only has an immediate effect, it is placed down here. If it has a brown effect or an ongoing effect, it is placed up here. The reason for this is that ongoing effects continue to be in effect until another card with an ongoing effect is placed over the top of it. So depending on what effects come out and whether they are ongoing or not, an ongoing effect can continue for several rounds. In this case, we look at the card. It tells us that every player loses coins equal to 10 less the number of coin flags in the city. Now, in this case, we have 2 coin flags in the city, meaning that every player would lose 8 coins. Now, the guild and the crown may be able to do so, but as soon as the circle loses 8 coins, it's going to be a negative and it's going to have to remove influence from the board. The ongoing effects, which are generally marked by this lantern/hourglass symbol, indicates that one of the basic actions is not going to be available and it's going to be covered up by one of these X symbols until this card is replaced. So I'm going to go to the top of the board, grab one of these X symbols. I'm going to move down to the basic action depicted on the card, which is this one, and I'm going to cover it up. So everybody knows that that basic action is not available for the moment. Other event cards may contain this symbol. That's an important symbol, and it's generally um, you have regard to it once the text on the card has been completed. Sorry, just to complete the text on the hard times card. The second aspect of the one-time effect is that you remove one civilian token from every quarter. So we would go to every quarter and remove a civilian token. The cube symbol is an opportunity for all of the players to potentially gain an additional cube on their player board. And remember, these cubes determine the number of cards a player draws at the start of a round. But getting more cubes becomes increasingly difficult. There is a cost. Cost is in influence and in money, both, not one or the other. To advance to the next level of cubes, you have to pay influence and coin equal to the new total. So in other words, if the crown wished to advance, it would have to pay 4 coins, which it can do, and remove 4 influence from the board. It can decide where to remove that influence. But let's say it decides to remove the influence here. It decides to pay the 4 coins. I'm going to delete the coins, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it gains an additional cube, which will allow it to draw 4 cards at the start of the next round and take more actions. But of course, it's at a cost of money and the removal of influence from the board. Now, neither of the other two factions has enough influence on the board, or in the case of the circle, enough money to take this action. But you should bear in mind that all funds paid in order to advance to the next level of cubes are paid to the crown, except for the crown who pays the bank. So, and this is done in turn order. So each player must decide in turn order whether it wishes to take this action. And the funds, if money is paid, must be paid to the crown. Um, there are other symbols which you may see on event cards. I'm going to go through them just to find them. Some of the cards obviously don't do anything. Others have complex effects. Others have effects that can vary depending on what's happening in the game at the time. So I'm going to try and find a card just to give you an idea. Here's one which has this on it. Some cards will have a symbol on the bottom right-hand corner, which is a small depiction of an event card. What this means is once this card has been completed, all the events on the card have been taken, or all the actions have been taken, and all the options have been exercised, then you go ahead and draw a further event card from the event deck. So it's not always the same number of cards that'll be used up, because you may on occasion draw more than one event in a given round. And of course, when the last event card is drawn, this indicates the end of the game, and the last round is completed, and a winner determined by who controls the most quarters. That is the event phase done and dusted. And lastly, the cleanup phase. In the cleanup phase, what we do is we go to the available buildings list and we remove either 1 or 2 buildings. In the case of a 2 or 3 player game, we would remove 2 buildings. This is a 3-player game, so we remove the buildings on this end. We remove them from the game into a discard pile. I'm just going to put them here for the moment, and we slide these along, and we draw 2 new cards and add them to these places. Any of these discs that have been flipped over, any of these quarter discs that have been flipped over in the course of the game, they'll be on their gray side. At the end of the turn, we flip them back onto their colorful side. We also advance the turn marker to the next quarter to indicate we're now in round 2, and we move the first player token to the next player. Now, in this particular case, if I recall correctly, it was the circle that began with the first player token. That would then move across the board, in this case, to the crown. I beg your pardon, it would move to the guild, who would become the first player in the next action phase. At the start of the next turn, all the players would draw cards equal to the number of cubes on their board, and we would begin again and repeat the sequence. So while leaving aside the action phase, that is a summary of what the other phases of the game entail and how a typical round looks when you play City of Stains. I hope that was helpful and that gave you a good idea of what you can expect in terms of the structure of a round of the game. In the next video, I'm going to dig in to what is essentially the heart of the game, which is the actions. And the next video will be about the basic actions, and then subsequent videos will deal with the advanced actions. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy getting to grips with this game, and I hope you start to appreciate the depth and strategic choice options that are available to you in the game as we progress through these videos. It's been fun doing this and conveying to you my own enjoyment and I've had over the years putting this game together, and I hope it's shared by you when you play it. I'm Rob Acton. Thanks for listening.